Good morning, everybody, and a very, very warm welcome to today's third edition of State of Asia. We're actually sold out today, so the empty seats you see are just people who are late for this morning. I want to thank you all for making time for Asia in what is an eventful week, and Asia may not be the first thing we all want to talk about, and we'll get into the whole Trump thing at several points throughout today as well, I promise. I'm delighted to see many of you joining us for the second or even third time, but there's plenty of people in the room who are here for the first time, and so for their benefit, I wanted to very briefly talk about what we want to achieve with this conference and why we are doing it. As the name suggests, State of Asia aims to provide an update on key developments in the region. And when we launched the conference in 2022, we were a bit uncertain if that was a good idea. At Asia Society, as you saw in the video, we spend all of our days tracking what is happening in Asia, and sort of trying to cram all of that in one day seemed ambitious, if not to say ludicrous. But today, at the beginning of the third edition, I can say with confidence that this is a worthwhile endeavor, and that it will be interesting and insightful. Not because it is possible, I just want to manage expectations here, not because it is possible to understand or explain Asia in a day, or in a week, or in a year, or ever, but because we feel that looking at the whole picture, sort of adopting a wide-angle lens, can help us see patterns. At Asia Society Switzerland, our mission is to develop and foster Asia Competence. And competence isn't just about information, it's about being able to spot patterns. So to start us off this morning, just very briefly, I want to talk about three patterns, three developments that we have been thinking about recently. And that's really just sort of to get you in the mood of thinking about Asia as we go through this day. So the first one, Asia is becoming ever more important. It's kind of a trite statement. It's true, obviously, it's true, but I think it also obscures what is actually the really important and decisive development. Because of course, Asia has been important for a long time. This is not something new. It has been relevant for a long time. It has been a theater for great power conflict. It has been a driver of economic growth. It has been a market for companies. It has been a manufacturing hub and a lot more. But what is changing now, and I think the development we're in the middle of, is not Asia's relevance, it's Asia's influence. In the words of Evan Medeiros, who was a top Asia advisor to Barack Obama, and now is a senior fellow at the Asia Society as well, Asia is moving from a price taker to a price setter. And I think that's a crucial development. Asia's importance has grown for decades, but the rules have been made in the West, on trade, on technology, on how the world is governed. But as Adam Tooze has made very clear yesterday evening in his State of Asia address, in the future, the rules will increasingly be made in Asia. The standards will be set in Asia. The solutions to global problems will have to come from Asia. It will be, as the opening slide, as you walked in, put it, Asia's world, and we will just be living in it. Yes, it's a Taylor Swift reference. Couldn't help myself. The second point I want to make, Asian countries and actors have increasing agency also in European geopolitics. This is sort of the mirror point to my first point. Asia was a theater for geopolitical conflict in the 20th century. Now, as another Asia Society colleague of mine, Raja Mohan, who delivered the very first State of Asia address in 2022, has argued, we start seeing more and more active involvement of Asian actors in Europe's geopolitics. Think of the news a few weeks ago that North Korean soldiers are now fighting in the war in Ukraine. But there are other examples. South Korea and Japan have regularly participated in NATO summits. India is expanding its engagements with European countries. Narendra Modi has visited Kiev not too long ago, as you'll remember. So to me, this indicates that, contrary to what we sometimes hear, Europe is not becoming irrelevant. It just cannot expect to have the kind of influence in the world it used to have. We are entering a time when, as much as we want to influence, we will be influenced as well. And a big chunk of that influence will be coming from Asia. Now, this isn't necessarily bad. There can be good life at the periphery. There are opportunities, I'm convinced, for Europe and Switzerland in this Asian world. But to leverage them, we now need to invest a lot more into understanding and engaging with Asia. The third point, as we move towards an Asian world, what is the best way to think about the new world order that is emerging? You can read very often that we are living in a new Cold War. With the US-China competition intensifying and covering geopolitics, tech, and trade, it certainly feels like that. But I think the analogy ultimately is wrong. There are two superpowers, but they're not two camps. And it seems unlikely we will see this clear and complete divide we saw during the actual Cold War. I just realized I wrote this line before the election result was called, so maybe we can get back to that afterwards. But the one reason I think, and I still continue to believe, that there are not going to be two camps is there are a lot of middle powers who are not keen to join any bloc. India, Turkey, or Brazil, they're often referred to as geopolitical swing powers, which will sort of flip between blocs and alliances depending on their interests and the geopolitical situation at the time. But I think that analogy too is somewhat imprecise because they're not actually swinging back and forth. They are engaging on multiple and often competing platforms at the very same time. Consider India as a member of the Quad, which includes the US and Australia and Japan, but as I'm sure you all have sort of gathered from the news, active participant in BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. It managed last year to host most Western heads of state at the G20 summit, while also buying unprecedented amounts of oil from sanctioned Russia. So I think the term, and if you've joined us last year, you'll remember we had a whole session about this, the best analogy that we found to talk about this development is hedging. This is what actors do when they want to hedge against a particular bet by also putting money on the opposite outcome. And I think that's exactly what these countries do. So if India is disengaging with China on their disputed border, they're not swinging, they're not moving away from their strategic engagement with the West, but it may be a hedge against that. Vietnam is another example. It's been very busy upgrading its diplomatic relationships, for example, with the US. It hasn't downgraded any of the others. So it's an additive strategy. It's adding more relationships, more engagement on top. It's not a swing, and it's not a switch. Hedging should not be confused with non-alignment or neutrality. It's an active strategy. It's placing many bets, not no bets. And it is directional, right? So it's not, the hedge is a different set of bets than the original bet. Not all bets are created equal. So today is dedicated to understanding what an Asian world looks like and how it influences us. So fittingly, we will start with a look at, the world. We like to broaden the scope even more at the beginning. And then we'll continue with a look at the similarities and differences between the region's three large economies, before taking a broad look at China and, of course, its relationship with the US and how that may change under a new administration. After lunch, we look at the prospects of two emerging Asian countries, India and Indonesia. In the next session, we'll explore key developments in demography, industrial policy, and the AI race. And finally, we'll bring it all back together by asking what Europe's Asian future will look like. Throughout the day, we welcome your questions on anything you want to know from our speakers. You can submit them at any point through Slido, so please go ahead and scan that QR code that you see on the slide. You can also go, if for some reason that is not working, to slido.com and enter the code SOA2024. If you've joined us last year, you already know this. We have a very high-paced program. We're running through a lot of information and a lot of thought in one short day. So what we do is, instead of having a short Q&A session in every program element, we've set aside time twice today, once just before lunch and once at the end of the day, to address the range of questions with all speakers present in one go. So that means you can submit any question you want to almost any speaker you want at almost any time, and then we'll grab a selection and we'll ask speakers who are all sitting here in the front row to address a number of them. We will also use Slido at several points during the day to run some polls, because we want to hear from you as well. We want to hear how you see the world and how you see Asia. And since we just talked about the Asian world, I thought we could start just also to get you in the habit of voting in these polls, but asking you what Europe's response to this Asian world should be. Should the West just focus on accepting Asian dominance? Should we strategically push back? Or can we remain flexible, maybe do some hedging of our own? So I'll ask you to submit your votes, and while you do that, I will add a few more notes to today's program. As in the last 2 years, I'm thrilled to have Bruno Massage with us. I'm still probably mispronouncing his last name even after like 7 years or so. Bruno is a prolific analyst and commentator, and at several points throughout the day, as he has done the last 2 years as well, we will ask him on stage to offer his real-time commentary and analysis of what's been said, how it relates to other sessions, and what open questions remain. Many of you are also aware of Asia Society Switzerland's Gen A Young Leadership Program, which offers a 1-year training on Asia Competence for 25 selected young fellows from Switzerland. I'm delighted that once again, the entire current class and quite a few alumni of that program are joining us today. They're an incredibly diverse and accomplished group, and I encourage you to chat with them about their experience and their insights during the breaks. They should all have a Gen A note on their badges so you can easily spot them. And as we've done in the last few years, we will also feature 3 Gen A fellows on stage throughout the day for a short 8-minute presentation on a topic dear to their hearts. While the rest of the conference is all about the wide-angle lens, these presentations really offer an opportunity to zoom in on a specific topic, on a specific place. Today this can be Okinawa or Shanghai or sign language. So I'm very much looking forward to that. And before we kick off, let me just add a few final words of thanks to Swiss Re, who are so graciously hosting us here at their very beautiful center, and who have been a key partner of Asia Society Switzerland from day one. And to the University of Zurich, who hosted last evening's State of Asia address with Adam Tooze, which many of you attended and which was absolutely packed. And I think we even have a picture of that we can show you. There we go. See if you can spot yourself. One very last remark. We have a lot of fantastic speakers today, and every one of them has an impressive and long CV. But I don't want to take time away from their insights by providing lengthy introductions. So I'm not going to do that. I will just basically say their name. And I encourage you to look at the conference booklet that you all have received to look up their bios and all their achievements. So yesterday evening, we discussed the state of Asia. But in the week of US elections, and with the prospect of a second Trump administration now a reality, it really makes sense to look at the state of the entire world. I think increasingly we realize how all these things are becoming interconnected and interdependent, and it's hard to separate them out. The state of the world, the state of the Asian world, so to speak. Let's first see how you think Europe should respond to the Asian world by seeing the results of the poll. Okay, well, that's not entirely unsurprising, is that you all want to stay very, very flexible. I think that's good. I think the question now will be, is that possible, and how exactly would that work?